أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال رب بما أغويتني لأزينن لهم في الأرض ولأغوينهم أجمعين إلا عبادك منهم المخلصين. قال هذا صراط علي مستقيم. إن عبادي ليس لك عليهم سلطان إلا من اتبعك من الغاوين. وإن جهنم لموعدهم أجمعين. لها 7 أبواب لكل باب منهم جزء مقسوم. إن المتقين في جنات وعيون. ادخلوها بسلام آمنين. ونزعنا ما في صدورهم من غل إخوانا على سرر متقابلين. لا يمسهم فيها نصب وما هم منها بمخرجين. نبئ عبادي أني أنا الغفور الرحيم وأن عذابي هو العذاب الأليم.
Iblis then said to God, "Because you have put me in the wrong, I will lure mankind on earth and put them in the wrong, all except your devoted servants." God said, "Devotion is a straight path to me. You will have no power over my servants, only over the ones who go astray and follow you. Hell is the promised place for all of these, with 7 gates each gate having its allotted share of them. But the righteous will be in gardens with springs. Enter them in peace and safety, and we shall remove any bitterness from their hearts. They will be like brothers, sitting on couches face to face. No weariness will ever touch them there, nor will they ever be expelled. Prophet, tell my servants that I am the forgiving, the merciful. But my torment is the truly painful one. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa wala, amma ba'd. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala narrates in this part of Surah Al-Hijr, again the story or the incident involving the creation of Adam alayhi salam and Iblis's reaction to that. One of the things that I mentioned in a previous session was it's important to consider the way in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has repeated something and subtle differences and nuances in that repetition. I didn't want to specifically focus on that today, but it's worth noting that this in this narration of this incident, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about our creation and the creation of the jinn. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created us, mankind, from clay and jinn from fire. And there's a bit of the ayat are spent on this. We didn't cover that part, but it's worth noting the benefit and you know the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that something mundane like clay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can use that to make something so miraculous like our creation. Even now there is so much about our creation that we don't know, despite all the science and research and so on that goes on. But in terms of the parts that we wanted to cover today, the ayat, the shaitan, Iblis, he says, and we covered this before, that he says that because you or Allah have put me in error, then I will effectively deceive, I'll mislead as many of these of mankind as I can. This is what I'm going to do. Iblis is making this oath, and we covered this before, and you know his arrogance in the way he tried to blame his error upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, Allah is free of this. It was clearly Iblis's error. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, or Iblis actually says, Illa ibadak, except your slave, minhum al-mukhlisin, those who you have chosen from amongst them. And this word ibad, it's important to understand what this means. So the slave, and firstly, you know, we should always recognize, and we shouldn't be shy of recognizing this, that Islam permits slavery. Okay, Islam permits slavery, but we also should recognize that the slavery that Islam permits is not the abhorrent slavery that, you know, was in, let's call it more contemporary times, the slave trade, that which was practiced in, you know, the mass scale kidnapping and shipping of people from the African continent. Because we find the hadith about that the master of the slave, he should feed his slave from his own food. He should clothe him from his own clothes. He shouldn't overwork him. And actually, if he gives him too much work, then the master should help his slave in the work that he gives him. That the master, if he strikes his slave, if he hits him or beats him, the expiation, the way that he seeks forgiveness for that action, he has to seek forgiveness, it's a sin. But the expiation for that is to free his slave. Okay, so this is, you know, the slave in Islam. Even the slave in Islam, it's recommended, and even some of the scholars said it's compulsory that the slave is given reasonable avenues to seek his freedom. Okay, that he works for X number of years, that he provides X amount of money to buy his freedom, or so on. But that the master, it's either recommended that he provides this avenue, or is even compulsory that he provides this avenue for the slave if the slave asks for it. So it should be very clear that the slavery in Islam is not like the slavery that we are more familiar with, that we immediately think of when we think of slavery. So slavery is permitted in Islam. But we are talking about the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So firstly, we'd ask, what are the characteristics of an abd, of a slave? What is it that makes them an abd? So the first and obvious thing, and the thing common between, you know, slaves amongst men and the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is ownership. Okay, ownership and obedience. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We belong to Allah. We say this when one of us dies. We belong to Allah, and to Him we return. We recognize our ownership. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our owner. Okay? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even mentions in the example in the next surah that darab Allah mathalan abdan mamluka. That is, the slave is one who is owned. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving the example of a slave who is owned. So this is one of the characteristics of the slave. The second is this humility and subjugation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us, huwa al-qahiru fawqa ibadi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the overpowering above His slaves. His slaves are subjugated to Him, are under His power. Okay? Or in kullu man fi as-samawati wal ardi illa ati ar-rahmani abda. That there isn't anyone except they will come on the day of judgment. Anyone in the heavens or the earth except they will come on the day of judgment with humility. Okay? Subjugated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the second characteristic of the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, in some ways, this is shared when we talk about slavery on this earth. But then the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and those who are of His righteous slaves, they have a special characteristic. That they come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taw'an, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. They come to Him by their choice. They submit themselves to Him. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu udkhulu fi silmi kafa. Oh, you who believe, enter into this submission completely. It's something you do by choice. قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهِ. All the prophets, they came to their nations and they said, oh my people, be slaves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by one's own choice. They come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willingly. And this is a key characteristic of the righteous slaves, the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the abd. And know that we should be all of these. We recognize that we are owned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we are under His power, that we are obedient to Him, and that we are submitting ourselves willingly to Him as ibad of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And know, in terms of the uses of the term ibad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He often uses this in a positive way. It is an honor for us to be His ibad. He calls them ibadi, okay, or ibadur rahman, His servants, His slaves. Whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala attributes to Himself, this is, an honor. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala attributes the slaves to Himself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the ayah here that these slaves are mukhlasun, not mukhlisun. Okay, they're not they have made themselves exclusive to Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen them. He has chosen them to be his slaves, to be his righteous servants. He calls them mukhlasun, the ones he has selected for himself. The ibadah often mentioned in the context of mercy. We mentioned already ibadah rahman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in, well-known famous ayah, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. So, O my slaves who have transgressed against themselves, don't despair of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, just further on in the passage that was recited, that tell my servants, نَبِّئْ عِبَادِي أَنِّي أَنَا الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. Tell my servants that me, I, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives repetition here, أَنِّي أَنَا, repetition, that I am the forgiving, the merciful. Mercy, connected with ibad. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions ibad in connection with closeness to Him. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. That when my servant, when my slave asks about me, then I am close. I answer his dua. And in fact, this is said in the context of the ayat about Ramadan. But this closeness, mentioned in relation to closeness, servants, slaves. Over here, again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in this passage, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that you will have no power over my servants. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has protected his servants, the righteous amongst them. He's protected them from shaitan, telling shaitan, you have no power over them, except those who follow you. But those who don't follow you, you don't have any power over them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَدْخُلِي فِي عِبَادِي وَدْخُلِي جَنَّتِي. One of the, beautiful ayat or passages of the Quran, 2 ayat at the end of Surah Al-Fajr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tells the slave who has achieved that satisfaction through their faith, the soul, that has achieved the satisfaction through their faith, to enter فَدْخُلِي فِي عِبَادِي, enter amongst my slaves, be amongst my slaves, and enter my paradise. Imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling you this. Enter amongst my slaves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying this. And enter my paradise. How honored and what a blessing it would be for us to hear these words from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Most High. So closeness related to the slaves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions his slaves in relation to closeness to him. And this is an important point, because when we ask, what is ibadah? What is this noun that comes with slave? What is servitude? Ibadah, or commonly translated as worship. Someone might say, we commonly translate it as worship. It's the acts of worship. The salah that one prays, their prayer. The zakah, the obligatory charity one gives. Sawm, fasting in Ramadan. Hajj, doing the Hajj to the Kaaba. All acts of worship. We also have the definition that ibadah is a word, a comprehensive word that covers all that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves and that is pleasing to him. And we also have the definition that it is that which is done seeking closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to achieve closeness to him. And in fact, we find the hadith, a massively important hadith. All of us should be familiar with this hadith, wherein Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he informs us. And it's a hadith Qudsi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself is informing us that his slave does not draw closer to him with anything more beloved than the compulsory actions. The most beloved things through which we can draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those things that we typically consider worship. The compulsory actions, the 5 prayers, daily prayers, the compulsory zakah that we give, making hajj, again compulsory, fasting Ramadan, again compulsory. These compulsory actions, they're the most beloved forms, actions that one can use to draw closer to Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself tells us this. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the same hadith, and my servant, my slave continues to draw close to me with the non-obligatory actions. Gives some extra sadaqah, prays some nawafil, smiles at his brother or his sister, her sister, or, so on and so forth. Non-compulsory actions. Gives the salam, and so on. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us his slave continues to draw closer to him with the non-obligatory actions until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves him. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves his slave, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs us that he becomes the hearing with which his slave hears, the sight with which he sees, the hand with which he strikes, the foot with which he walks. What does this mean? The scholars, they said that this means that a person, all that they do becomes aligned with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes for us. That then we understand the ayah, إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ. That the prayer, this form of ibadah, the prayer, it prohibits one from all that is obscene and evil, all the sinful actions. It prevents one from this. Why? Because the person, their ibadah has become such that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves them, and their whole being is aligned with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes for them. So their salah, their acts of worship, cause them to stay away from that which is sinful. We find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. Seek aid through the patience and through the prayer. And the patience, the scholars, they mentioned here, means the fasting. So again, these acts of worship, they become a source of solace for the believer. They become a source of solace for the believer. That they seek aid, they seek protection, they seek satisfaction through these acts of worship. Why? Because their whole being, as we said, is aligned with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes for them. So the purpose of worship is to draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what worship is. It is an act which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed for us, that we use to draw closer to him. And when one is close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all that they do becomes aligned with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes for them. And we said the servant seeks solace, seeks satisfaction, seeks protection and aid through his servitude, through his ibadah, through being an abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So see then how this abd, this ibad, this slavery to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something of honor, something that we should seek, something that we should be pleased and satisfied with. And how is this status achieved? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in that hadith. By one draws closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through his worship. You worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you draw closer to him. And then your worship becomes a source of satisfaction, a source of closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a source of tranquility to a person. And this is what a person should be seeking through their worship. Finally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says at the end of this passage that our brother Atiq recited for us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, tell my servants, nabbi ibadi, tell my servants, anni ana al-ghafur rahim, that I am the forgiving, the merciful. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us this connection between servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his mercy. But also tell them that my torment is truly painful. And note, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He associates the mercy and forgiveness to Himself. But when He talks about His punishment, He gives the attributes of the punishment to the punishment, not to Himself. The punishment is painful, but Allah is forgiving and merciful. And we mentioned this before, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His anger on the day of judgment will be great, but His mercy will be greater than His anger. But the point here, when a person worships, they worship between these two things. They recognize that they will make mistakes and they will seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy and forgiveness. But they also don't become from those who say, I can do whatever I want because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forgiving. I'll do whatever I want. No, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's torment, His punishment is truly painful as well. So we shouldn't forget this. We worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala between hope of His mercy, but fear of His torment. And if one finds themselves always depending on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, then they should try and increase themselves in their fear. And if somebody always finds themselves worried about the punishment and despairing almost of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, then they should try to increase themselves in their understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness and mercy, their hope for His forgiveness and mercy. And this is how the scholars, they said that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala between hope and between fear. And out of love for Him, seeking closeness to Him. So this is Ibad al-Rahman, the servants, the slaves of Ar-Rahman, the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, we'll stop on that point. وسبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.